A lot of men losing their life right now because they playing it entirely on defense. They waiting to see what the economy gonna do. They ain't about getting no money for real. They think they safe at their job. They waiting to see what their girl gonna do. They think just because they're in a relationship or a marriage that she won't go nowhere. That she ain't looking at her other options. She ain't weighing what she can go out there and get. They just waiting for better opportunities to magically drop in their laps. They sitting ducks, but they don't know that life and the way that this world is trending right now is about to drop a missile right on top of their head. I tell men all the time that just being good or average ain't enough these days. And that don't mean you gotta go out and get a Lambo and get the mansion and all these things they tell you is better than average. That's the high value man, as they wanna put it. It's really about positioning yourself in a way that your energy can never be siphoned away from you, drained. And the way you put yourself in that position is to dominate. But a man can't dominate unless he's willing to go into attack mode, which is what we're talking about right here. And after today, you're gonna understand how to do this better than any other men in your vicinity. And to put it in perspective for you, I'm gonna highlight a military combat strategy from the 1950s. It was a colonel in the US Air Force by the name of John Boyd. He was studying some of the combat data that came back from the Korean War. He was studying F-86 air, and he was studying this data trying to figure out why the American F-86 fighter pilots kept getting the best of the enemy aircraft fighters when on paper, the enemy aircraft were more powerful and faster. And within that data, what he found changed the combat strategy forever in the military. He discovered it wasn't about who had the bigger engine or more firepower up there in the sky. He learned that it's about who could process information the fastest and execute. And he developed from that what's now known as the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. And I'm about to break down what that is for you so you can start implementing it today and take control of your life. Combat, the pilot who could cycle through this loop the fastest, completely reset his enemy's whole game plan. Because now, instead of him being able to go on the attack and observe, he now had his old timeline rearranged. He was forced on defense, and now he was more susceptible to falling into the hands of the pilot on the other side. And I'm telling you from experience, you don't want to be the guy that's always on defense, that's just out here trying to survive with just enough energy so that people don't step on you every single day, living like a second-class citizen in your own life. I'm gonna break it down through these 4 steps, and I'm also gonna give you a brutal bonus that the top 1% in the world, that they all operate by. And that one right there is gonna be the period on the new you, so stick around and pay attention. Number 1, we gotta observe. Now right here, you gotta take a step back in your own life. You gotta look at it for what it is. Completely cold, completely without emotion. Look at all the surrounding facts of your life, how it currently exists. In the cockpit of a plane, you're scanning the horizon for threats. You're looking for raw data, your positioning, all the information you'll need to make a move. And in life, it's the exact same. You gotta look at where your money at. You gotta look at where your relationships at with women, with your family, with friends. What do you like about it? What you don't like about it? And then take another step back and look at how it plays into that broader, longer trajectory of your life, where it's carrying you, where it's positioning you. They talk a lot about how men of today are mediocre. They ain't like the men of the past. And one big part of that, what a lot of people experience with the men of today, is delusion. They want to ignore the data because they get all emotional and sentimental about where they currently exist in life. They're attached and shackled to the emotions of all these past situations, past people that they have inside. So it's hard for them to take a hard look at what their life currently is. And a lot of the reason why is because it would take extreme accountability for them to highlight the role they played in them getting to this position. And a lot of men don't want to do that. That's how you can separate yourself, just by being extremely accountable with yourself in your observation of your life. Because it's going to allow you to get the most data, the most answers about how you need to move forward. You got to ask yourself, who's violating my boundaries? You got to look at how am I violating myself? What food am I eating that I know I shouldn't be? I want to get in shape, so why am I eating late at night? Why am I doing this emotional, eating donuts and cookies and cakes, drinking all the time? Where have I compromised on my standards? Do I even have standards for myself? These are all the questions that you got to ask yourself. You got to take a deep dive, a deep self-audit with who you are. You can't attack an enemy that you refuse to look at. That's why this first step is absolute data collection. You're looking at the raw facts and deciding what you're about to cut and what's going to get to stay. No emotion, no excuses, just the raw facts. And that brings us to step 2, which is orient. This is how you interpret everything that you just got in step 1, how you look at it, how you're able to analyze it and look at why you came to this certain point. And Colonel Boyd found out that our orientation is shaped by our genetic heritage, cultural tradition, and our past experiences. And in a general sense, all of us men have suffered at some point from the world conditioning us to a certain compliant, soft, submissive state of mind. And that state of mind is amplified by our specific lives, the stuff we go through with our parents, our siblings, our friends, with the women we deal with over the years, what religion we follow, the traumas we experienced in growing up to becoming men. All these things shape our ability to interpret our lives. So this is why you gotta be so intentional on this step. After you collect that raw data, now you gotta get raw with your interpretation of it. Looking at what it means, looking at how it affects you, how it can affect your future, your steps ahead. And when you get into that attack mode mindset, now you're starting to look at evolutionary truth. You interpret the data that you collect about your life from the standpoint now of self-preservation. Real men understand that the world is dangerous. Just because they don't want violence, they don't want problems, it don't mean that violence and problems won't find them. So applying it here, the attack mode, man, his orientation is top tier because he's collected the raw data, and now his interpretation of that data is telling him how he relates to the threats around him, where he's vulnerable and where he's strong. He's formulating all this in his mind. When he senses disrespect or a lack of appreciation in his life, he getting ghosted, he gone, because he knows what his presence really means. He also knows how quickly his energy can be compromised if he stays in these toxic environments around these toxic people too long. So he practices radical detachment by way of his cold interpretation of his life and where he wants to be. You gotta constantly and ruthlessly reorient your mind towards the illusions of the modern day and back in the high level execution. And right before you get to that execution, it brings you to step 3, which is decide. And the thing about this step is even with men who truly have a genuine desire to do better by themselves, do better by their lives, to really make more of an impact in the world, a lot of them can't get past the major step of just deciding what life is gonna be. They wanna think about all the negative factors that exist around them. They wanna think about all the things that could go wrong, and it paralyzes them, stops them cold in their tracks. It's analysis paralysis of the highest form. They analyze, they overthink, make excuses on why they stagnant, why they've been in the same spot for years. They don't want to leave that girl alone because they're scared of the emotional emptiness that might exist because they got used to her. They're scared to free up time from their dead-end job that they're working just because it's somewhat stable for them. They don't want to go out and get a skill and test the world and offer themselves in the most creative ways they can think of. They don't got the balls to do it. So they stop right here on step 3. And going back to the military example, hesitation like that up there in the sky is death. In a dog fight, when you flying, you maneuvering, your finger on the trigger, you gotta make life or death decisions at 1,000 miles per hour. You don't have time to stop and overthink. You gotta move. You gotta decide that you're going home alive that day. The minute you hesitate, the enemy now has a chance for him to make a decision. Now it's a missile locked on your tail. And life is the same way. You hesitate and you don't pick a path for your life, you'll be assigned one. And I guarantee you won't like it because it's not gonna be for your greatest good. It'll only be for the best use that the world can get out of you. On its terms though. And decision is not finding this perfect risk-free plan. It's about looking at that trajectory I talked about, that general direction of your life, and taking steps towards that. Because even if you make mistakes, I've been told throughout my whole football career throughout the years, make a mistake at 1,000 miles per hour with your highest level of effort. Because that'll always be a perfect plan that's executed too late. And that brings us to step number 4, which is act. And decide and act are very closely related because once you decide, you immediately got to take a step. When you really decide that you want to change in your life, you got to look at what's the smallest change I can make that allows me to move forward on this new version of my life. This part is not a nudge. You ain't testing the waters anymore. You implement an overwhelming physical and mental force on your life to immediately start turning the gears of change to where you really want to be. If you want to get in shape, you don't try to eat better. You stop buying bullshit at the grocery store. You You stop going out to eat to these fast food places. You drive right on by them to your house and eat the meal prep that you should have made early in the week. If you want better results with women, you don't sit at the house watching these lame YouTube videos on texting tactics and how to play mind games with it. Nah, you go out there, get in the field, and talk to them like a real man and pick up on how women like to be interacted with. And then you perfect your approach. You want to make more money. You don't sit around begging, hoping for a better job, trying to get a 25, 75 cent raise. No, you get in the field and you learn a skill. You make use of this world wide web, this internet, where you can learn anything you want to. That phone in your pocket, the phone you watching me on right now. You use AI, you use Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude. All these tools, you take them and you apply them to that trajectory in your life and figure out the exact steps that you want to take. And you don't gotta wait to make a big leap. You figure out what is the smallest distance that I can cover right now. And the research is a part of that process, figuring out how you need to walk, because it at least shows you that you're looking for a detailed plan. You're looking for an exact roadmap to where you want to go. You're not just saying, oh, I want to do that. I hope to do this. No, you're looking at the steps. You're breaking it down into objectives that you can actually check off. You put your money where your mouth is. You stop talking about it. You start being about it, walking in it. That's the only way. You literally attacking. You're going in attack mode for that life that you want. The second that you act, you go into that attack mode. Now you rearrange the whole chessboard. Because just like the fighter pilots we talked about in the beginning, once you go on the attack, that person, an obstacle that was in your way at first, that was stressing you out, now they have to suddenly react to that sudden movement that you just implemented. Now you have control of the timeline. They on defense, you entirely on offense. And now that you have control of that timeline, I got to show you the bonus. And this is the other one. This is where you get into that top 1% I talked about. This is where you not only take control of your life, but now you're really playing with it. It's like a video game at this point. One of my favorite video games ever was Ace Combat. It's a fighter pilot game. But that game was so fun to me because I had control of these super fast planes, and it allowed me to, it's very realistic, so it allowed me to maneuver and fly and do all these different combat techniques. It made me really feel like I was in the cockpit. And that brings me to that bonus. You gotta develop an alter ego. And the reason why the alter ego is so important is because when you really go into that higher level of your life, sometimes the current version of you, that human ego you have, it ain't enough, because that human ego is attached to so many things from your past. Like I talked about, what Colonel Boyd talked about, the genetic heritage, your cultural traditions, your past traumas, everything. And sometimes, no matter how much you try to fight for a better life, these things will hold you back. So you have to tap into a completely different frequency. And that's where the alter ego comes into play, because this is where you can attach yourself to characteristics that may not be available in your immediate environment. This is what Kobe did with Black Mamba. When the media was all in his face trying to beat down on the man, Kobe Bryant, he created the Black Mamba, this completely different version of himself that could bypass the human limitations of himself. Personal turmoil, the broken team environment, everything. This version of him could step right over there. It was cold. It could still get the job done. The technical aspects of basketball, what he had to do on the court, which was completely separate from the noise that he was facing because of who he was on the court. And that's what a lot of men don't realize, and the alter ego would save them from it if they could tap into it. That being a man, everybody expects you to show up regardless, so you can't always show up as yourself. I'm not saying be inauthentic. I'm saying you gotta show up on a different frequency. The real you is always gonna be there at the core, but you gotta learn how to tap into these different versions of yourself so you can get the job done. Cause you can lose a family member, you can lose your job, fall on hard times, your girl might leave you. And even simpler than that, you might just wake up one day and not have it in you to go out and get it. But the world don't care about that. Nobody cares. I always tell men you can count on your first few fingers how many people really care about your well-being day to day beyond your usefulness to them. So you can't afford to always be locked into who you believe you are at your core. Sometimes you gotta take a step up. For me, I'm Drew. But when I hop online, when I'm doing these videos, I'm Drew Skywalker. That's a different level of me. It's a different version. It's still me at the core, but this version of me, this frequency of me, allows me to jump on here and really talk my shit and really put some swag to it and talk about things that other men are either scared to talk about or they're holding themselves back because they're scared to be on camera. They're scared of the backlash they might get in the comments. And Drew Skywalker don't care about none of that because this frequency of me has already anticipated the good and the bad that's gonna come with this path. So when I step up into that frequency, I'm doing it with all things considered. But what you'll learn, with the funny thing about alter egos, what I'm experiencing right now is that it starts to become all one because it's like you're the same person, but you attaching to the frequency. They like guns on your hip or something. You take a certain weapon out depending on what the situation calls for. I might need a pistol, I might need a knife, I might need a one-hitter quitter. I'm with a scope. And when I learned that, that's how I learned to start implementing multiple alter egos. That's something I'll break down in another video. But once you get to a certain level with it, once you get comfortable with tapping into those other frequencies of yourself to get the job done, the job that's at hand, then you really start playing life on attack mode, on offense. The controller is in your hands. You in the cockpit, waiting to hit that red button. This the one that's really gonna take you to that next step. This the one gonna put you ahead of everybody. But that's attack mode 101 in a nutshell. You start running that loop, you compress it, you speed it up, and then you get to take control. You never let life dictate your terms again. And the thing about this is that it's a long form breakdown, so it's giving you the architecture from a military perspective. But even with this, it's very different from going out and executing it when your life is really on the line, when you really have to deal with the decisions that you make day to day. And if you're a man that saw this video and you're ready to stop guessing, stop throwing shit at the wall and trying to see what sticks, if you want to build an internal territory, fill in all the holes inside your chest, build an ultimate apex anatomy of yourself, the best body that you can construct. And if you want to take that and combine it into a swagger that'll allow you to walk into any room, any social situation, and immediately position yourself for power, the coaching lane with me is open. And I can't work with everybody. What I'm offering is for a specialized group of men, apex predators, the men that are on the other side of the journey that you'll start in my free community, the Apex Academy. And that's always there for you, but if you're ready to go to the top of the food chain right now and really get down to the elite stuff, the link to apply for my high ticket coaching program, Apex Ascent, is down in the description below. We don't do comfort, we don't do excuses. We playing the game of life entirely on offense. We leaving a paw print, and we're doing it from the top of the food chain. Go apply today. May the force be with you. Peace.